That actually is my next question, and I put it in a slightly different way. That given the information available to you and given these caveats, was there no other aspect of the Iraqi regime that you felt could serve as a better basis for the UN route, as a better basis for the legality of action?
You mean
in terms of all the things that you had described in your speeches and about Saddam's brutality and what you were saying just now about his use of WMD on Kurds, on Shia?
I think I actually said it, maybe in the Chicago speech and maybe elsewhere, that there are many regimes that I would like to see the back of, but you can't just go through, I'm afraid, and remove all the dictatorships. I mean, people often used to say to me about Mugabe in Zimbabwe and the Burma regime and so on. But you have to have a basis that is about a security threat. And so, yes, you're absolutely right. That my assessment of the security threat was intimately connected with the nature of the regime. When whether the members of the committee actually done this, but when you actually read the descriptions of what happened when Saddam Hussein used chemical weapons in the Halabja village, and by some accounts as many as 5,000 people died through chemical weapons, there are people in Iraq today still suffer the consequence of that. To me, that indicated a mindset that was horrific. It's horrific whether or not he then uses weapons of mass destruction, but if there's any possibility of him ever acquiring them or using them, it's a mindset that indicates this is a profoundly wicked, I would say almost psychopathic man. We were worried, obviously, that after him, his two sons seemed to be as bad, if not worse. So yes, it's absolutely true. This definitely impacted on our thinking.
So you were contrasting, in a way, what was known about Saddam's past use of WMD. You were sort of giving that a weight and not giving the same weight to the doubts and caveats about the actual situation in early 2002?
No, I'd say very much that we did give weight to that, and that's why by the time you get to September 2002, you've got a lot more information. But it's one of the things that's most difficult sometimes, because people look at this in the light of what we know now. Saddam and weapons of mass destruction was not a counterintuitive notion. You know, he had used them. He definitely had them. He was in breach of, I think, 10 United Nations resolutions on them. And so, in a sense, it would have required quite strong evidence the other way to have been doubting the fact that he had this program.
Well, Sir Lawrence Freedman will be asking you in a moment about the September dossier, but I'd like to just move on for the moment to another aspect, and that is, you said on a number of occasions in 2002 and indeed in early 2003 that Iraq was a test of the international community's ability to deal with both WMD and terrorism. If I could just quote from your monthly press conference on the 18th of February 2003, "The stance that the world takes now against Saddam is not just vital in its own right, it is a huge test of our seriousness in dealing with the twin threats of weapons of mass destruction and terrorism." Can you tell us how you saw those links, and again, what evidence you had that there were links? Because, as you know, the Butler Committee has established that there weren't direct links at that time between Saddam and al-Qaeda.
The link was in my mind at that time that there was a proliferation threat that was potentially growing, because we had Iran, we had North Korea, we had Libya, we had Iraq, obviously. I would put a lot of emphasis on the AQ Khan activities. My fear was, and I would say I hold this fear stronger today than I did back then, as a result of what Iran, particularly today, is doing. My fear is that states that are highly repressive or failed, the danger of a WMD link is that they become porous, they construct all sorts of different alliances with people, and yes, it's true, we did not have evidence that Saddam was, for example, behind the September the 11th attacks, and part of the difference between ourselves and the Americans is we were always saying we don't accept that. It is interesting, and this is referred to in the Butler report, however, that actually Zarqawi did go into Iraq, in fact, prior to the invasion. Now, when I look at, because I spend a lot of time obviously out in the region today, when I look at the way that Iran today links up with terror groups, and this is a different topic for a different day, but I would say that a large part of the destabilization in the Middle East at the present time comes from Iran. The link between Iran having nuclear weapons capability and those types of terrorist organization, it's the combination of that that makes them particularly dangerous. So you're absolutely right, Sir Martin. You know, we were in a position back then where we was actually saying to the Americans, look, Saddam and Al-Qaeda, it's two separate things, but I always worried that at some point these things would come together. Not Saddam and Al-Qaeda simply, but the notion of states proliferating WMD and terrorist groups. I still think that is a major risk today.
And were there indications in the information you were getting that there were links, if not between, say, Al-Qaeda and Saddam, that there were somehow links between other terrorist organizations and him and his potential WMD?
Well, there was obviously Saddam and the funding of Palestine, the families of Palestinian suicide bombers and so on. I think what's very interesting, and we will come on to this later, but when you actually look at what happened in Iraq and what happens indeed in Afghanistan today, what happens in Yemen today, Somalia, many different countries around the region, there are very strong links between terrorist organizations and states that will support or sponsor them. And the reason why I think this is a particular danger today is because there are these states, Iran in particular, that are linked to this extreme and, in my view, misguided view about Islam. So I think it is, we still face this threat today, in my view, very powerfully.
And finally, in 2002, did you feel that this terror WMD link was also a potential threat to the United Kingdom?
Yes, because for the reasons that I've given, I think that these, as had happened before, if Saddam, freed from sanctions, was able to pursue WMD programs, I was very sure that at some point we were going to be involved in the consequences of that.